Thanks very much, James, and what a great talk about enterprise adoption of Lightning Network. Next up, we've got Rusty Russell from Blockstream.
Make me an offer, next level invoicing. Awesome.
Thank you. Whoa. Hi. The audio is obviously working. My name is Rusty Russell, and this is actually my official job title at Blockstream, code contributor. It's generic, it's flexible, it's probably a little too humble maybe, but that is me. Now, before we begin the main part of this talk, I want to tell you a story. Once upon a time, when Bitcoin was young, there was an enterprise called Satoshi Dice. And the happy Bitcoiners frolicked in the blocks, and they would send their Bitcoin to Satoshi Dice and receive either a multiple in return or a single Satoshi consolation prize. And into our happy tale come the evil core developers who introduced the dreaded dust limit, destroyed the business model of Satoshi Dice and the brave entrepreneurs, I believe, who were mainly poor orphans and adorable puppy dogs, in fact. And I can see you looking horrified. Rusty, why are you telling me this awful and heart-rending tale? Because, like the Bitcoin network, the Lightning Network will change. It will come from this happy place that it is now, and it will have to adapt as the environment that we are in becomes more adversarial. It's going to have to develop defenses against various forms of behavior and spam. And so I feel, perhaps so that nobody's giving a talk like this about me in 5 years' time, we should give you some warning about things that generally the developers agree will happen to the network in the next some mumble number of years. Now, the first is that, despite what Jamison said, fees will rise. And there are two real reasons for this. The first is that the default fees that dominate the network today are approximately zero. And that has proven insufficient to maintain robust connectivity. We're already seeing people increase fees, and we expect that to continue to some level. But there's a second reason, and that is that defending against some kinds of spam on the network requires us to introduce some upfront fees. And the problem is that these upfront fees have to be large enough to prevent spam, but small enough compared to the current success-based fees so that we're not incentivizing failure. Because if we start allowing nodes to just steal the money, then users will fall back on reputation systems to figure out what nodes to route through. And as far as we can tell, reputation systems are inherently centralizing. So we want to avoid that. So if you are relying on fees staying around 1 part per million, like today, you should be thinking or rethinking your plans for the future. Okay. The other thing that will happen is very slow payments will have to be defended against. So anything that takes more than maybe a minute or two is going to have some solution. And that's because really slow payments are trivial to weaponize on the network. So the network will have to defend itself the same way the Bitcoin network had to defend itself against dust. And there are two obvious ways to do this. One is to charge a much larger upfront fee for things that self-identify as slow payments. And the second thing is to aggressively close channels when delays happen. And there is a proposal for that, which nobody likes, but that seems to be the best thing on the table. So if your business model relies on, payments that are taking minutes or blocks or days, that's fine, but make sure you have a plan B. And there are some things in the protocol that we can do to alleviate a lot of these things that we're doing today. And this is what I want to emphasize. There's nothing wrong with doing any of these things at the moment. That's fantastic. But as a public service announcement, I do want to tell you that things are going to have to change eventually. So that's the end of the PSA part of my talk. Now I'm going to talk about what I came here to talk about, which is, well, I'm a protocol level person. I'm happy with bits and bytes. And there are a whole heap of cool things happening in the protocol that I could have talked about, and there are some amazing talks on the schedule talking about future stuff that's coming up. But I dug out something that we've been talking about for a while because for this audience, I really want your feedback on something. So let's start with, I wrote Bolt 11, and I probably am a bigger fan of invoices than anyone you'll ever meet who's not actually an accountant. The oldest piece of writing that we have is actually a Babylonian receipt, or maybe an invoice. And the reason is that when there's no intermediary in a transaction, an invoice or a receipt is key to keeping the vendor honest. Now, as we grow the Lightning Network into something that supports real commerce between people you don't know and trust, you will definitely thank me that we have cryptographic invoices. But invoices also suck for a whole range of use cases that were things that we really, really want to do. So they say that every problem in computer science can be solved by adding another layer of indirection, and that is exactly what I've done. Now, I do want to caution you that I wrote literally some of this draft bolt on the plane on the way here. So I made arbitrary choices, some of which are indefensible and will no doubt change. But I want to present it to you now so that we can tear it apart and put it back together as something that we can live with. So none of these decisions that I present here as if they are carved in stone actually really matter, and any number of them could change. But this is what it might look like. A lot like a Bolt 11 invoice, except it starts with LNO. You might turn it into a QR code. It gets into the payer's hands somehow. And then they send, through the Lightning Network itself, a request to the node that signed the offer. And the node replies with the real invoice. And from that point, the payer then pays the invoice like it normally would, probably, but not necessarily, along the same path that it used to request the invoice in the first place. Now, if we break up the offer, it starts with LNO1, and I know Roast Beef and Connor will be really happy with this. It's actually TLV data inside the invoice, using our standard TLV format, not the boutique one that we use in Bolt 11. And at the end, it has a signature from the node that it came from, or maybe a node ID and signature if we're going to be fancy and go for like 32-byte pub keys and schnorr and everything else that people want these days. And the TLV data contains the offer itself. Now, it has some obvious things. It has an ID, so that when I ask the node for the offer, it knows which one I'm talking about. It has a description which says what you're offering, right? You know, cup of coffee or whatever it may be. It has an expiry, but unlike Bolt 11 expiries, if there's no expiry, it means it doesn't expire. These things can stay around for a long time. It may have some path hints. We have these hints already in Bolt 11. And they tell you how to get to the node if it's hard to reach or if it's through private channels, or even just a hint about capacity. And also, of course, this is new. It has a maximum quantity. For some things you want to offer, but it makes sense for someone to order 10 of them at once. So we've added a quantity optionally to the offer. Okay. And of course, it contains an amount, right, which is the amount you will pay for the item that's being offered, multiplied by the quantity if you have it. But the amount also contains a currency code. That's weird. Because it turns out that offers can stick around for a long time. And generally, this currency code could be in Bitcoin if you're a Bitcoin maximalist. But for a lot of places, their actual underlying costs are in a different currency, so they want to reflect that in the offer. Now, that's going to seem a little bit strange to you, but it particularly comes home when you have an offer with recurrence. So an offer might be a simple cup of coffee, or it might be something that happens every 60 seconds that you keep paying, or it could be every 7 days, every month, or even every year. And there are a lot of things that this applies to, that you want this recurrence. It could also have a limited number. It could be 6 easy payments. It could be something that is naturally limited to 12 or something. It could also have a base time. Sometimes you pay and then you pay again in 60 seconds. Sometimes you pay on the first of the month and you pay every month. If you specify a base time, that anchors where that payment occurs. And there may be a pay window. Perhaps you have to pay within the first 3 days of the month. And there's a special value here that says maybe if you pay halfway through the month, you only pay half. You pay proportion to the remaining amount in that period. I didn't go all out on this. You cannot say, I want you to pay me on the first Tuesday of the month or the last weekend of the month. But this seems to offer enough flexibility for the moment at least, with the minimum intersection of complexity. Okay. Now we also have additional data. You may also say, and I also want you to send me a delivery address. For some things that makes perfect sense, right? You're ordering something, I gotta send it to you. I want you to specify a delivery address. Or maybe a telephone number if it's like a credit, for example, like Bitrefill, doing phone credit. It could be like a voucher code. This conference had a voucher code. A lot of places have a voucher code field. Like if you supply a voucher code, perhaps that gives you a discount, your invoice. And this, we can add additional ones because this uses our standard bit encoding to say what you need. And the Lightning protocol at the low level has this rule that says it's okay to be odd. And that means that if you don't understand something and it's odd, that's okay, you can ignore it. But if you don't understand something and it's even, that means you're in trouble, you need to go upgrade or something. Now this also provides unsolicited payments, sometimes called donations. If an offer has a 0 or empty offer ID, that's special. And that means I haven't actually seen an offer, I just want to give you money. Now this message, when we request an invoice, is onion encrypted like a normal HTLC payment through the Lightning Network, so no one can tell where it's going, etc. And it contains the offer ID that says, here's the offer I'm asking for. And it contains a nonce, a pub key that the payer chooses, and of course the quantity and amount if it was a straight donation, the recurrence number if it's one of a series, the delivery info and stuff like that if that's something that's required. And then the invoice reply message could be an error message, like, I don't know what offer that is, or that's actually expired, what are you doing, or something like that. It could be a replacement offer. Oh, sorry, that's expired, but here's a new one. And that has to be signed by the key in the original. So if Food Corp buys out Bar Corp and you use a Food Corp invoice, it might be replaced by a Bar Corp invoice for the same thing, but it has to be signed by the original Food Corp. But normally the reply will just be the invoice, right? That's how it's supposed to work. And invoices, as of like 2 weeks ago or something, have an S field, a secret field, that you're supposed to send through with the payment that proves that you saw the invoice. Now, in the case of an invoice that we've requested, the secret is actually a Merkle tree of the invoice request. And you basically take the tag that they provide in the invoice request and you build up a Merkle tree like this. First you make sure it's a power of 2, and then you SHA everything, and then you sort them by the SHAs, and then you do the Merkle thing, and you end up with a single secret. And for those of you who completely didn't follow that, this gives you the ability to prove to third parties various things about the invoice and thus the payment. I can prove any part of the delivery info. I can prove that I paid this and I had it shipped to Australia, or I had it shipped to my postal code. Without revealing anything else about the payment, I can prove to you that they screwed me over because they didn't deliver it, and here's the proof that I ordered it here. You can also prove that you are the one who paid for it, or at least you are the one who requested that specific invoice, because it has that transient key in it that we sent as part of the invoice request. And I can prove to you what that key is, and I can prove to you that I control the key by producing a signature. Now, that's pretty cool, right? An offer says, cool, ask me for an invoice. And you request it over Lightning. But also, sometimes you just want the invoice request. I want to tell you, give me an invoice, please. And so we came up with another encoding, LNI, where you say, cool, it's basically an invoice request that we'd normally send over the Lightning Network, except in encoded form. And it looks the same, but it also has a description that says what you're supposed to invoice me for. This is the use case of, I don't know, an exchange withdrawal, for example. It would push this LNI thing through to you, maybe as a barcode, maybe through your browser, to say, give me an invoice so I can pay you. And it would say what the payment's for. It may have some paths on how to reach them. It'll have the amount. But most importantly, this can be used for refunds, right? I want the user to present me with an invoice so I can pay them a refund. Because remember, the invoice secret commits to the payer key that they gave me originally, that transient key that they gave me. So they can use that to prove that they are the ones who paid and that they are the ones who are entitled to the refund. And one of the problems with refunds generally, or any kind of reverse flow, is that in Lightning, you generally know who you're paying, but they don't know where the payment's coming from. And if you tell them to pay you, you're telling them who you are, or at least your node ID. But we have another proposal coming, which is rendezvous routing, and that preserves recipient privacy. So when you combine these technologies, you can get your refund without actually revealing what node you are on the network. So, what do offers give us? They give us static invoices. An offer is a static invoice. You can print out these QR codes and you can slap them on things, and somebody can come along and scan them and pay that way. You can slap it on your website, because in order to securely use a Bolt 11 invoice, you have to generate a fresh one for every payment and not reuse them. And ideally, a Bolt 11 invoice should have the description that is specific enough to identify that particular payment. Not just a cup of coffee, but a cup of coffee that I delivered at this time to this person, at this address or whatever. Because otherwise, I can prove that I paid for a cup of coffee, but I can't prove anything useful about it. Like, they can say, sure, we delivered a cup of coffee. Like, well, that wasn't my coffee. Like, well, how do you know? But this gives you static invoices. It really does. It gives you user-controlled recurring payments. Vendors love recurring payments with credit cards. They love them, right? They want you to sign up for free trial periods so they can put you on the recurring payments. Recurring payments, when it's a pull model like that, are evil, and that's pretty clear, because it's incredibly painful to cancel them. User-controlled recurring payments, however, bring back some of that, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Sovereignty over your payments. You control your recurring payments. You flip across the tab in your wallet, and there you can see all your recurring payments. You just cancel them. Done. Because you're the one pushing them out every 60 seconds or every month or whatever the schedule is. And you're the one who agreed to that. And that's incredibly important. And it's useful. I mean, I have no problem with recurring payments for some things as long as I consent to them and I can cancel them at any time. It gives you spontaneous donations with a receipt. At the moment, there are various hacks that you can use to pay a node, but you don't have any evidence that you actually paid it or that they actually got it. Or the amount. If you have like an invoice without an amount, there's no evidence that you actually paid that amount, right? You can have an invoice that doesn't specify an amount and will accept anything, but then you have no way to prove that you gave them more than 1 Satoshi, or technically more than 1 millisatoshi. So this gives you spontaneous donations with a receipt. And of course, it allows full or partial refunds, which is pretty cool as well. So my question, particularly to this crowd here, is: is this useful? Like, is this something that you want? What can't this do? Are there other things, plans that you have, things that you're building that would be really great to do that this doesn't quite make it? Then please come and talk to me, or send me an email, or join the discussion, so that we can make sure that we have as much coverage as possible of these ideas. because I kind of want to throw myself forward a little bit and look at the future and what I might like to see with this kind of model, right? So somehow, could be on a billboard, could be on an ad, it could be pushed through to my browsers, whatever. I see this offer for like a weekly delivery of coffee beans. And it's at €2 per 100 grams. Except my wallet doesn't show me that. It shows me in Australian dollars, $3.50 per 100 grams weekly. How many do I want? And I go, cool, that looks like a great deal. I will do that. This is, I ordered 10 of them, 1 kilo. My wallet says they want a delivery address. I select my work delivery address. Underneath, my wallet has now used that information. It's got approval from me to spend this money. It goes out, it fetches the real invoice, and it comes back, and they've modified the description. Description no longer says weekly coffee beans, it now says weekly coffee beans plus postage. And so now it says they added plus postage, and they also changed the amount from what we expected. Of course, the amounts are actually in Bitcoin. And it said, oh, by the way, they've charged an extra 20 Australian dollars because postage to Australia is really expensive. And at that point, I either go, no, cancel that, I'm going to have it delivered to my remailer, or I go, I really want that coffee, and I hit yes. Go. Done. And of course, if everything had come back within the parameters that it had originally offered me, it wouldn't have prompted me again to say, oh, by the way, the deal changed. Right? Now, what's cool is I've signed up for this once a week, so next week, it automatically goes back and just re-requests the, uses the offer, requests the new invoice. And remember, it's already got approval for me to spend this money, $35 in this case, in Australian dollars. And so internally it does the conversion, and if the price is within, say, 5%, it doesn't bother re-prompting me. But if the price has changed, it looks at the Bitcoin amount that's in the invoice, and it's moved too much, it'll re-prompt me and say, hold on, the deal has changed. Now it knows from the original offer that the thing was in euros. So it may even be able to tell me, well, okay, so the euro has moved, and that's probably why. Or it could just be we're using different price bases for how much Bitcoin is worth, or it could be they're trying to screw me. And at that point, it will stop and go, hold on, the price has gone up. If the price goes down, I probably don't care. And it will require reapproval, but normally it will just continue, right? And this emphasizes two things. Firstly, I want my wallet to be my agent to deal with this stuff, right? When I want it to check with me and get approval, but once it's got approval, I want it to just go and do it. But the other thing is that when I want to buy coffee or whatever it is that I'm after, I do not want to go to your website, and I do not want to click around, and I do not want to find the thing, and I do not want to subscribe to your newsletter, and I do not want to create an account. I just want you to shut up and take my money. And in theory, this kind of flow allows exactly that to happen. Scan or get pushed the thing, hit yes, wallet, please do that, and we're done. We don't have a relationship. I've just bought something from you. And that is what I would like to see. So, I've deliberately left room for questions. So do we have any questions about offers? There's a microphone here, so if you stick your hand up. Yeah.
Yes, thanks for the talk. I want to be sure that I understood how this works. So basically, you request an invoice, and then you generate an invoice with a refund in order to generate like a generic invoice every single time, and then do not need to receive the specific specifications for every payment, right?
So if you're trying to offer someone a refund for something? Okay.
I mean, is the process of paying without an invoice generating a generic invoice that could be generated anytime?
Okay, so let's look at the way it happens at the moment. If someone wants to offer you a refund over the Lightning Network, they say, send me an invoice so I can pay you. And they say it in words, like over Twitter or email or whatever. And then you generate an invoice, and make sure you get the amount right, and who you invoice it to and all those things. I just want to automate that flow. So there will be a standard message that says, generate me an invoice for this. And your wallet will generate an invoice. Or it'll say to you, hey, they want me to generate an invoice, are you okay with that? And you say yes. And then it will send the invoice to them, and then they will pay it. So I just simply want to automate that flow that is currently done manually and is, of course, very prone to mistakes because I'm in a different time zone, and the invoice default timeout used to be 1 hour, and by the time they woke up, the invoice had expired and they could no longer send me my refund. All that kind of crap goes away if we automate the refund flow. And it makes sense if we've got this mechanism to communicate and ask for invoices through the Lightning Network, we can also repurpose it to do this refund flow. I hope that answers. Yeah. Do we have any other questions? Yeah.
There are two things. Firstly, I recently made an issue on LNURL repository about doing pretty much similar thing. You thought it much more true about these various scenarios, but about automation of workflows. So maybe it seems like your idea to do it in both directly may be better. Especially because it has built-in onion routing, so you can protect privacy. And another idea that I had before is to also categorize the fields that you are selling. So if you have a supermarket, you probably already have some kind of system that categorizes whether this is food, this is, I don't know, some tools, and so on. And then your wallet could make you reports on how you are spending your money without you having to fill it manually and without screwing your privacy. Because, for instance, my bank offers me this possibility to have nice charts and whatever. I was amazed, but at the same time horrified that, oh hell, this is what they know about me.
Yeah.
So this would be really cool to not have to get rid of privacy or comfort.
That is something I hadn't thought about at all, for example, which is great. That's exactly why I'm here to present, to throw this out here. Categorization would be definitely something that would be useful. And we just have to come up with a spec for it. Now, to be fair, I was without my notes here, but I did forget to credit LNURL, who have done a lot of experimentation in this space. And I love what they've done with invoice requests and stuff like that, and building those layers on top. I just want more. I want more of that. And so I forgot to mention them, but the LNURL spec it's kind of a grab bag of things that you need to bring Lightning up a level. And I'm like, we want that. And we want it in at the bolt level. I think having individual implementations do it is cool for experimentation. And eventually I hope to implement this in C Lightning. But the important thing is that we get it spec'd out. We get a whole heap of eyes on it. We get a whole heap of people to play with it. We get, commonality so that everyone can use it. So I really do think addressing it at the standards level is the way to go. Cool. How are we going for time? We have like 90 seconds. Do we have one final question?
Yeah, so you said something about payment secrets with a Merkle root, I guess. Okay, so I know that there are like overpay attacks where if someone overpays, you can intercept the payment and steal fees, I guess. Like with donation invoices, you can steal all the money. How does the secret actually get to the recipient so that they can like verify it, I guess?
Right, okay, so the secret actually is sent through with the embedded in the onion at the moment. So, or at least in the spec that we agreed on yesterday, but I haven't edited the spec yet to make the changes. But yeah, we will be tunneling that through the onion packet. So it will come along with the payment itself. Will come the secret. And at the moment, it's a random nonce. But with this proposal, it will actually, in that case, be a full Merkle tree. So you'll be able to prove things about it. OK, well, I think we're done on time.